Hello and welcome to the podcast, 10 Lessons That Took 50 Years to Learn, where we dispense wisdom, not just fact or mere information, to a rising audience of international leaders. My name is Duff Watkins and I'm your host. This podcast is produced by the Professional Development Forum, which accelerates the performance of young executives of any age in the modern workplace. Our guest today is Matt Doherty. Matt Doherty is an expert on leadership, and he's also the author of a book called Rebound. First question, Matt, why did you call the book Rebound?
Well, I think that when you said I was an expert on leadership, I think that means I came from the school of hard knocks. And when you get knocked down, you need to rebound. And my background is in basketball. So I wanted to have a play on words with rebound the ball, but also rebound from adversity, rebound from setbacks, and in my case, rebound from failure, where I lost my job as the head coach at my alma mater.
Yes, just on that note, a lot of people nowadays are unfamiliar with that story. So let me give it to you in a condensed version. You were a high school All-American. You were recruited to the University of North Carolina to play basketball. UNC is a basketball powerhouse. You were on the national championship team of 1982. You played alongside a couple of guys called James Worthy and Michael Jordan. I believe Michael was your roommate at UNC.
He was not. He was not. No, that was not the case. No.
But he's a friend of yours.
Oh yeah, we lived across the hall. But
okay.
Yes, he was not my roommate. Yeah. I just want to,
No, thank you. Thank you.
We're still. He wrote the foreword to this book, Duff.
Mm-hmm. Which he doesn't do very often for people. But
correct.
So the point is, you're playing against a couple of guys who went to the Hall of Fame in professional basketball. And this is the point I want to make to everybody, okay? Now, Matt, you weren't just a white boy out there making up the numbers, all right? I mean, you were playing in the Atlantic Coast Conference. This was one of the most intense basketball conferences in the U.S., and you were the second player in the history of the conference to earn 1,000 points, 400 rebounds, 400 assists over your career. So you contributed.
Yeah, well, that was a stat. I think I was the second player in Carolina history, maybe the ACC history. I don't know. It's one of those stats that they make up to make you feel good about the game. I basically was a jack of all trades, master of none. But I look back and, I had an important role in that, I was that coach on the floor. I wasn't very talented, Duff. I couldn't run and jump, but I knew how to play. And that's one of the reasons I went to play for Coach Smith, because I know he would appreciate me for the things I could do as opposed to, the things I couldn't do.
Very important. Well, and so you graduate and you flirted with the professional league, but you spent some time on Wall Street and found that dissatisfactory. Got the coaching bug, as a lot of players do, then started working your way up the ziggurat of coaching, assistant coaching. Got a gig as a head coach of Notre Dame, big league. Did very well the first year. The call came. And Michael Jordan was one of the guys who made the call to urge you to come back to take over from the legendary coach at North Carolina, or one of the legendary coach, Dean Smith, who at the time had won more basketball games than anybody in history. He has since been surpassed. You, under some pressures, you came back to head at UNC, and things went pretty well. You were National Coach of the Year 2001. You want to know how well things were going for you? I'm sitting in my mother's house in North Carolina, and I'm watching the game. You're on the sidelines coaching. My sister comes in. She has no interest in basketball. She sits down. She starts chatting to me. She looks over at you on the TV. She says, "He can coach me anytime." So that's a true story. So not only were you Coach of the Year, you were a big stud too. So things were going so well. You're on top of the hill, and then you weren't.
Right. No, it was a drastic fall. When I give corporate talks, I show a graph, and I show the graph climbing up to a level of a 10. And then I show it dropping. And I ask people, what does that look like? And they say, most people say it looks like the stock market crash. Uh-huh. And I say, then the next slide, I say, that's my coaching career. That's my trajectory of my coaching career. it went up and went up and up, and then it dropped. And I was a national coach of the year in 2001 and 2003. I was forced to resign. And it was very traumatic experience, Duff. I felt like I was falling off the Empire State Building and there was no safety net to catch me.
And okay, I'm going to quote a famous gridiron coach, Bum Phillips. There's only two kinds of coaches, them that's been fired, them that's going to be fired. And I will say, you went on to be fired at a couple of other jobs. So, I mean, you're right on schedule.
Yeah,
the way
I got that nailed. I got that down. I wanted to perfect it, Duff. I think it's important. You know, I'm a perfectionist.
Well, you were coaching at Southern Methodist University, SMU, in Texas. And somehow, you may not remember, this is many years ago. And we started exchanging a few emails, and you asked, did I know anybody in Australia? Because as a good coach, you're always recruiting people. And I did happen to know some people who were associated with good players, young players in Australia. So I put you in contact. And then I sent you an email saying, Matt, when you look back in retrospect at your time at UNC, what did you learn? What would you do differently? And then you sent back a very cogent, lucid, thoughtful reply, which I can't find anymore because it was years ago. And that, my friend, is why I'd like you to be on the show today, because it showed me that you had reflected upon it. In fact, I've since learned that you actually taught a course at SMU about failure based on your personal experience.
Yeah, no, I mean, the thing that I found, I'm pretty authentic. I'm an open book. And you know, people talk about success and pound their chest and write books, but I want to talk about failure and the lessons that I learned so I can share them with other people. So hopefully people will avoid the landmines that I stepped on.
Mm-hmm. Lesson number one, emotional intelligence beats emotional ignorance every time.
Well, in 2003, when I lost my job, you know, Duff, as a basketball coach and a basketball player, we're wired to, after a loss or even after a win, to watch the film and get better. So it only made sense to me that when I lost my job, I wanted to watch the proverbial film and try to get better. Mm-hmm. So I went on a leadership journey and took classes, executive classes, nothing a full semester. And if you had if they had an opening and you had the money and you could fog a mirror, you got in. But I took classes at UVA and Wharton in Philadelphia. And I was sitting in a class in Wharton taught by Fran Johnston, who I mentioned in the book. And she's talking about emotional intelligence. And this was in 2003. And I'm sitting there listening to this and I'm just soaking it all in. And I never heard of emotional intelligence before 2003. And as I'm sitting in this class, I'm saying to myself, you know, if I took this class before I was a head coach, maybe I'd still be the head coach. Mm-hmm. So the emotional intelligence part, I did not get. That was not the in my DNA. We're all wired differently. And so, you know, as you do, I talk about in the book, Stevitt, I talk about in the book is the 6 No's of leadership, KNOWS, and I use the acronym STEVIT. And the first letter S is you got to know yourself. And then the second letter T, you've got to know your team. And I didn't really know myself, as stupid as that sounds, especially in comparison to other people. So when I lost my job and I went on this leadership journey, I took the Myers-Briggs assessment and realized that I was an ENTJ. And I jokingly say I've been called a lot of 4-letter words before, Duff, but never an ENTJ. And so, but to realize that only 2% of the population are ENTJs. And I'm thinking I'm elite, right? That I'm a badass.
That's one way of looking at it.
Right? Well, the other way was that 98% of the population don't look at things the way I look at them. That's emotional intelligence. That's emotional awareness. That's self-awareness. That's understanding now that your team will look at things differently than you look at them. And so that is the emotional intelligence that I was lacking when I took over at North Carolina.
And as you point out, leadership is a learned thing, and a lot of it's learning about yourself. So, and that's what struck me is after your failure, you looked at the film, so to speak, and you went back and tried to learn more about what caused it and how to correct it, which is what it takes. It takes exertion on a leader's part to assume the role of leadership. The military has this down very well, by the way, in my experience.
Well, they're the best. They're the best. I mean, when I can talk to a military person, a friend of mine who I mentioned in the book is Matt Karras, who's a lieutenant colonel in the Army. I learned so much from Matt, from core values to symbolism, you know, and the military, if you can tap into the military and read books about the military and get to know somebody who served and just pick their brains, that's somebody you should put on your personal board of directors and have that you can tap into as a mentor.
That reminds me, Dave Odom, when he was coaching at Wake Forest University basketball, he did one of those goodwill tours in the Middle East for with the military, and he came away and said, "I thought I knew something about teamwork. I know nothing compared to those guys."
Exactly.
All right. Lesson number 2: befriend change. Now, I think every situation you walked into as a coach, probably every situation a coach walks into, there is some turbulence, some turmoil, because it's a situation of change. I always got the feeling change was not your friend when you walked into UNC.
No, I think, you know, you've got to grow. You grow at the end of your comfort zone. So most people are not comfortable with change. Matter of fact, if you look at the DISC assessment, most people are S's, which is they like steady, they like consistency. That's 69% of the population. Now I'm a DI in the DISC assessment, a high D, director, driver. I is the influencer. I like change. I get stimulated by change. I like walking into a room not knowing what to expect, because that is like mental gymnastics for me. And I like to kind of, you know, that's why I like coaching, because there's constant change on the court and I could see the patterns and I want to try to move the chess pieces. Most people don't like change. Now, when I got to Notre Dame, they were looking for change. They needed change. They embraced change, most of the change. Some of the change they did not like at first, but they didn't undo it when I left, if you will. North Carolina, they had 40 years of success. I represented change, even though I went to school there. That was some of my lack of social awareness, emotional intelligence. I brought my staff with me. That signified tremendous change that was not well received. So that's when I talk about in the 6 No's of leadership, STEVIT, STE, the E is the environment. You've got to understand your environment. What environment are you walking into? At Notre Dame, they embraced change. At North Carolina, the environment was set in stone. They did not want change. So I should have gone slower with change.
That's what I remember from your email. You said, when you were at SMU, when you emailed me, you said, I would have gone slower when I went to UNC. Because I remember, Matt, you fired Phil Ford. And I thought, my God, you know, who would dare fire Phil Ford, a legend in the state of basketball?
See, that's the perception, but I never fired Phil Ford. I didn't hire Phil Ford. You know what I mean? Like most coaches, you bring in your own staff. And oh, by the way, I asked the AD if I could do that. And he said yes. So it wasn't that I hired Phil and fired him. It's just when you come in as a new coach, you get to bring your staff and hire the people you want. And Phil, in the previous staff, I wanted to bring my own staff with me. And that was a mistake. I should have found a way and gone slower and found a way to keep Phil, Dave Henners, and Pat Sullivan, all former players at UNC, on staff.
And
That's part of going. That's part of going slow, Duff, to say, okay, here are the landmines. There's a landmine. That's Phil Ford. That's Dave Hanners. That Pat Sullivan. Let's avoid stepping on that landmine. How can we manage that better? But the other thing, there was a time factor that I got the job July 11th, and most coaches get jobs in March or April. July is the busy recruiting time as a coach. So I had that going too. That should have just forced me even more to slow down and figure out a plan. I think one thing I've learned even more recently, that I should have asked Coach Smith. You know, even though he was not the athletic director, he was the one who was the leader. He was the one who cast the biggest shadow over the organization. And I should have asked him about me bringing my staff. I didn't, because Dick Bedore was the AD. And I also think I was afraid of what Dean Smith would have said.
And can I just point out to those who don't know, bringing your staff with you is standard practice in coaching. I mean, every sport that I know of, everywhere that I know of, is standard practice. And in fact, I've been wanting to say this to you for years. Every single thing you did, Matt, could have worked for you in a different environment at a different time. And I've seen it done. I've seen it succeed. You know, people have succeeded doing the very things you did and succeed quickly.
That's why, Duff, I mentioned instead of the E, knowing your environment. And that's why you step into an environment, like you said, 9 out of 10 jobs, that would have worked fine. But North Carolina was that unique unicorn that it was not fine. And so those people listening or reading the book, when you're taking a new job at a bank, you know, wherever it might be, in a leadership role, really understand the environment. And politics, office politics, corporate politics are real.
Very real.
You know, is there an existing, is there somebody there that didn't get the job that may feel slighted? Is there somebody on the board that still wants to micromanage? You know, you have to understand those and either play to it when you take the job or don't take the job, because anything in between will lead to probably dismissal or extreme heartache.
I work with executives around the world in this accelerated performance program. One of the first questions I ask is, who opposes your appointment? And if they say, oh, well, nobody, I don't know. And then I realize we got a problem, because there's always resistance somewhere, because people being people. And one of the first things we seek to do is to neutralize it, balance it, understand it, or extirpate it, whatever is required. I don't know. It depends on each situation. But all right.
That's exactly what I just talked about. The environment. You got it.
Well, okay, you talked about the 6 no's of leadership. I have 3 of them. There's self, team, environment. What are the other 3?
Vision. You got to know your vision. I mean, it sounds common sense, but a lot of people don't clarify their vision to their team. And I think make it to the point where they can really visualize it. They may talk about it, but I think in athletics, we do a great job of visualization. So, you know, we want pictures of cutting down the nets. We want fans storming the courts. You know, those are pictures that I paint in the minds of my players, and even actually have actual pictures, because I want them seeing that, feeling that, knowing what that's going to look like. What is the parade going to look like when we win the national championship? What is that going to look like? And that excites people. It pulls them towards the goal, the vision, but it also then you get them to buy in.
Mhm.
You know, you look around the locker room, you say, don't you want to do that? Yeah, coach, I want to do that. Okay. All right. You go around the room, everyone signs up for that, right? Then when it gets hard in practice, or when you suffer a defeat in a game and their heads are down, they're dejected, you can point back to that vision, to that picture, to you committing in that locker room that you wanted to win a championship. So now I can say to you, Duff, and hold you accountable. You want to win a championship? It takes hard work. It takes overcoming adversity, and then get us back in line towards that goal.
Okay. Self, team, environment, vision. What else we got?
Right. The I is industry. You know, it's kind of funny sometimes when somebody gets a job, but they aren't an expert in their industry. Now, doesn't mean, you know, when Jack Welch was the CEO of GE, you know, I'm sure he didn't know how to put a turbine engine together, right? But he hired the experts. He had the knowledge of leadership. So you need to be your industry expert. As the head basketball coach at North Carolina, I better know how to guard pick and rolls. I better know what the other team is doing. I better put my team in position to succeed. Otherwise, your team is not going to want to follow you. It comes down to competence. Are you competent? And are you staying current? We challenge our players to do continuing education, you know, to work on their games in the off season. Well, what are we doing as leaders to work on our trade in the off season? Are we continuing to get better? Are we working with, that's why I do executive coaching. You know, are we doing, you know, are we working with executive coaches to get better? Are we working with, I'm a Vistage chair with Vistage is the oldest and largest executive coaching company in the world. And we bring CEOs together to challenge each other and handle issues to grow, learn and grow and get better. And so are you doing that as a leader? Because if you're not, then you're not putting your organization and your people in position to be successful.
It's one of my first lessons in the corporate world was a guy. He shared an older guy than me at the time. He shared the same cubicle as I did, and I asked him what he read, and he said, "No, not much really. I mean, everything I read is books on business." And the light went on for me because I never thought about reading a book on business, and I read voluminously. And it suddenly hit me, your education doesn't stop in the corporate world. In the business world, you're always continuing to hone your skills or work on your game, so to speak, and watch that film and develop yourself.
Yeah, there's a couple, one thing that comes to mind with that is two things that come to mind. There's no finish line in leadership. When you get in American football, when you get to the 10-yard line in the red zone, in leadership, all of a sudden, someone pushes a button and the field gets extended another 100 yards. Okay, there's no finish line in leadership. And the second thing that meant, you know, you touched on regarding reading books, your life is impacted by two things: the people you meet and the books you read. Boom, boom. You know, reading. I mean, I wish I was a better reader. I love to read. And I really enjoy reading about history and business. And I'm in the middle of reading right now Shackleton's Way, which is about Ernest Shackleton and his endurance expedition. And if people who haven't read that book, or if you have, reread it, it's really powerful on leadership.
Talk about a man, talk about a leader. Shackleton, I got to tell you this, Shackleton took, was it 6 or 12 guys in a little dinghy and navigated them away from Antarctica to safety, and they recreated that, and with some British volunteers, and some of them were commandos, and, you know, pretty tough guys, and they filmed it. And I got to tell you, I've never seen 12 more miserable guys in a boat than those poor bastards freezing to death.
Yeah,
Attitude.
I go out the door. Literally last night, I'm out the door to let my dog do what she needs to do before bedtime. And it's like 34 degrees outside. And, you know, I have a sweater on and long pants. And I come in and I say to myself, it's freezing outside. And my first thought was, Shackleton's and his men lived that way for, I don't know what it was, 9 to 12 months straight. And without light, because they lived in darkness half the year. I couldn't imagine.
Yeah,
Couldn't
yeah.
imagine. I think I'm a tough guy. I don't think I can handle that.
Yeah, that dispels, history has dispelled all illusions I had about any of that nonsense. I realize what a softy I am.
But you asked about the last two letters.
Yes.
I is the industry, and then T, and I think this one is maybe the most important, is mine for the truth. Because I think leaders do a bad job of mining for the truth. And if you don't manage the truth will manage you.
When you say mine for truth, you mean as in dig, excavate?
Yes, meaning you need to create an environment where people are willing to bring you the truth. Because the higher you go up the org chart, the less truth you get. Because people are afraid. Because the power, they don't want to lose their job. They don't want to lose their status. They don't want to feel like they're disrespecting you. And conversely, you know, human nature is as you go up the org chart, you feel, you get a sense of ego. I really, in my mind, and I talk about this in corporate talks, I think we should envision flipping the org chart and have it as an inverted pyramid, because that is true servant leadership. And then the truth will trickle down to you. It's a lot easier for things to trickle down than for things to be pushed up.
Any takers on that yet, Matt? Inverting the corporate structure?
Yeah, I don't know, but it sounds good, doesn't it?
It does. It does. I'm a support. I always say to people, you want to see who's got the power, hold a fire drill and look at all your staff out there on the pavement, and they'll be texting or chatting or drinking coffee or whatever. And look inside your building and see how much is getting done. Nothing. So that's where the power resides, in the people.
Yep.
All right. Lesson number 4, how to hire. I'm greatly interested in this because, you know, I work in executive search.
Well, you know, I should be asking you these questions, but I think that the only thing you can go off of about future behavior is past behavior. And I think sometimes we are quick to hire because people are good. They can fool us with a resume, with a good conversation. They're good talkers. They have the right people calling you. But we don't drill down and really get to know them and are patient in the hiring process. And I think that we need to have each person on the team who will work with that individual interview them. One, it gives them a feeling of respect, that they're included in the process. Two, you know, they may find something in the interview process that is a red flag and that needs to be discussed. So I think that to go slow in the hiring process and be as thorough as possible and almost be a private investigator, where you look into their past and find out, are there any issues? And the biggest issues with me would be character issues. You know, you can train somebody to do something, and we're talking about different levels, whether you're talking about CEO or somebody who's just joining your team. Either one is critical, you know, some more critical than others, because, you know, you can easily displace somebody on the lower level of the org chart. But I think that the mistakes I have made were when you hire somebody too quickly, or you have a bias that you think this person is something that you want them to be and they're not. So you
Hmm.
overlook
Hmm.
some things, confirmation bias.
Hmm.
Um, and so I think that you've got to go slow because it's easy to hire, it's hard to fire, and the collateral damage of having an employee who doesn't fit can really damage the culture of your organization.
Hmm. Hmm. Yes, it's you mentioned a couple of psychometric tools. I have worked with psychometric tools for 30 years and always trying to learn as much as I can about a person before you advance them for a role, or you're always trying to get the fit right. And there's no magic to it. You just do as much homework and research as you can, and it's really a range of probabilities. And most of the time it works out well. Sometimes it doesn't. Um, all right, so that's how to hire. How to fire?
Yeah, I think that it says a lot about you. I think that if your core values, and this my core values are respect, trust, commitment, positivity. So if that is truly your core values, and my mission statement is to make a positive impact on the people I meet and the groups I work with. So there's a grace in leadership. Leaders should have some grace. And the way you let someone go says a lot about you. Do you, one, have you done reviews with them? Have you tried everything to put them in position to be successful? Have you worked with them? Have you coached them? Have you held them accountable? Have you had reviews with them? Not only formal reviews, but intermittent reviews. Because let's say you have a review every 6 months, maybe you have it every quarter. What happens in those 3 months? If you do something wrong or something not so much wrong, but maybe doesn't fit the behavior I want in our organization, and it comes to my attention, and I don't address it with you immediately, I wait to the review. Shame on me as a leader,
Mm-hmm.
because you need to. My college coach would say, praise the actions you want repeated, but I think you also need to address any behavior that you don't think is becoming to your organization as soon as possible. It's just like training, I hate to say it, training a dog or raising a child. If I wait a week later to punish a child for spilling milk, that's very confusing and disrespectful, quite frankly. So I think that you need to hold people accountable. You need to put them in position to be successful. You need to onboard them properly. And I think sometimes, and I'm probably guilty of this, you hire somebody and you throw them into a job and there's no onboarding process, and you hope you're throwing them into the deep end and they'll be able to swim. So what's the onboarding process? And giving them some confidence and really coaching them on your culture and what's important to you. And that should be done in the interview process, so there are no surprises. But then it comes to the ultimate decision, you need to let somebody go. A couple of things come to mind. It's not easy, or let's hope it's not easy, right? Because
Mm-hmm.
if you have a heart, it's not easy. So a friend of mine said, put a picture of your family on your desk, and every decision you make is in their best interest. Because it's easy to put off a fire, and you put it off, you put it off. Well, that's not helping feeding my family.
Mm-hmm.
And oh, by the way, that's going to cause dissension in the workforce, because everyone knows what you're feeling. So if your teammate is a slacker or doing things that aren't becoming to the organization, that's going to cause you distraction, may even cause you to want to leave the company and go somewhere else, because maybe you're having to carry his load or you're afraid he's going to put the company in jeopardy. So the quicker you can make that decision, the better for everyone involved. and then do it in a respectful manner. I think you have to have HR in the meeting, because you don't want just one-on-one, then it's he said, she said, and you worry about lawsuits. And then pay the person fairly. What do they deserve? And dignify them, give them dignity. Don't walk them out with a security guard and a box of their personal belongings. Don't embarrass them. And then they have their dignity, and you agree, hey, I'll say good things, you can say good things, and move on down the road. Because that will say more about your leadership than when you hire the person.
Yeah, there is a way to let people go. Yeah, that's a fact. And it does reflect back on you as a leader. Your comments about, I was thinking, something you said reminded me of Spartans. When a Spartan, they were a warrior society. They're just all professional warriors. When you're a boy, you turn 7, they assign you to a mentor. And then the training of a Spartan boy is pretty hard. And if you cry out in some of the drills, let's call them full contact drills, as one boy did, he whimpered evidently. And so the Spartans punished his mentor because the mentor is responsible for coaching the kid. So what's wrong with the kid is the fact that he wasn't coached well enough. I laughed when I read that, because it's there's some wisdom to that.
There's a lot of wisdom here, right?
Yeah,
a lot of wisdom. Yes.
Okay, the lesson number 5 was how to fire. Lesson number 6, strengthen your core values. I gotta say, this core stuff, reminds me of the gym. The gym is very fattest to talk about core strength. And I mean, I've been gymming for, half a century. I still play basketball, Matt. And it's with some good guys too. And it sounds like one of those fattest kind of, I don't know, core values. What does it really mean, is what I'm asking you.
Well, I think I get it. Like I'm not a fan of a lot of fluff in leadership. Like, I don't want wasted brain space. I don't want wasted energy. I want things to be efficient. So, when I was coaching, I didn't have a lot of stuff and sayings and stuff all over the wall. I wanted stuff that really meant something. And core values became more important to me when I met with Matt Karras, who was the lieutenant colonel in the Army. We talked beforehand about, the best leaders in the world are military. And as I started to understand core values, that's where everything flows in your organization. Now, you got to believe in it. Coach Smith would say, start how you finish, meaning that if you're going to start something, you better finish it. Like, don't come to a meeting and say, oh, we're going to have core values and we're going to put these core values together and get all excited about it. And then a month later, you're not talking about core values. You're not modeling those core values. These things need to be well thought out and established with the long term in mind. You cannot just come up with core values and say, put them on a wall, and those are our core values today. No. They need to be well thought out with your senior staff, and have them drill holes into what pushback could we get? Because when it's presented, there needs to be some buy-in. So quite frankly, that's why you have captains. That's why you have leaders in your organization. Pull them in. Let them be the ones that maybe establish or put their stamp of approval on it, because then they'll be able to sell it to the organization. Now, oh, by the way, if your core values are respect, trust, and commitment, which mine were, that shows them respect. And that also builds a trust and a commitment. So I came up with RTC, and then I added a P to it. So R is respect, T is trust, C, commitment, P is positivity. And I only believe you can have 3 or 4 core values, Duff, because you can't remember more than 4 things. Okay, why are phone numbers 3 and 4 digits long and not 7? I can remember a phone number that's 3 and 4 digits long. I can't remember 7 digits long. It's kind of crazy, right? But that's how the brain works. So I want stuff that's repeatable. When I go to corporations and talk, and I'll ask people, okay, what are your core values? And they kind of look up in the sky and they can't recall them. That's not very effective leadership. They should be able to recall them at a snap of a finger. Same thing with and we'll talk about mission statements next, but they should be able to know what your core values are, and every decision you make are rooted in your core values. Is that decision we're going to make going to be respectful to our customer, respectful to our employees? Will it continue to develop trust, commitment, positivity? I want people that bring positive energy to the workplace, because there are 2 kind of players: energy givers and energy suckers. And I don't want to be around energy suckers.
Okay, yeah, but yet when you were deposed at North Carolina, I mean, the things that were said about you, you were attacked, you were assailed, everything from being an incompetent coach to being a flawed person to being a bad person. I mean, they really put it on you pretty much, and everything.
That's how not to fire. That's how not to fire.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, they really just assailed your core.
No, I know. Hey, listen, I felt like they took a Bowie knife and cut me from my throat down to my navel and pulled back the layers and exposed my guts to the world. That's how I felt. Yes.
Yeah, and we had, I mean, it just, and from every quarter, players, former players, except the players, some players stood up for you, not enough, I would say, in retrospect. Anyway, my point is, what do you do when your core values are attacked and you are diminished, and people act like you don't have those core values?
Well, but at that time, I didn't really embrace those core values, and I didn't demonstrate those core values. I was not, to a lot of people, I didn't show respect, by bringing my own staff. That did not show respect to the Carolina family. Trust. There were a couple times, and I talk about it in the book, about coaching scars, where I broke a trust of a player, and I regret that very much. By the way, maybe I reacted. And then, so my core values, I did not have them formalized at that point as a coach. And that was part of my evolution on my leadership journey, realizing I need core values. I need to preach these core values, and I need to model these core values, because I did not do a good job of that at North Carolina.
Well, and you're a pretty young guy too. You were 37. I mean, pretty young.
I think I was 30 when I was coaching in North Carolina. I took the job in '99, so I was born. So I was 30. I was 37. Yes.
Yeah. So that was you at the big leagues at a relatively young age for coaching.
And I was only a head coach 1 year.
Yeah, an experienced.
So that's the key. It's like going from the assistant manager at a small retail store like Ace Hardware in the United States to the being the CEO of GE. That's a pretty drastic jump.
Yeah, it is. It is. Lesson number 7. It's not a mission without a statement.
Yeah, I like that, Duff. I think it's kind of in line with your core values, and it kind of in line with your vision, what we talk about with Stevitt. What is the mission statement? And this needs to be basically one sentence that's repeatable by everyone in your organization. I laugh when I go into a company and behind the receptionist is a mission statement, and it's a paragraph with about 5 sentences. And I get glossed over. My eyes start getting glazed over as I'm reading it.
Of course.
I go to corporate talks again and I'll say, ask them, okay, raise your hand if you know your mission statement. Not many hands get raised. Or I'll ask somebody, I'll call on somebody and say, what's your mission statement of your company? And they kind of look up in the sky, they start to mumble, and then they giggle. Very few people know the mission statement of their organization. Coach Smith always talked about play hard, play smart, play together. Is that core values? Is that a mission statement? It could be either one, but that's what we knew. Play hard, play smart, play together. And if we did that, we'd win. And that's still, what's preached at North Carolina with Roy Williams. So it has to be simple and it has to be impactful. And that's why I said earlier, my mission statement for me and my coaching practice is I want to make a positive impact on the people I meet and the organizations I work with. Boom, done. That's it. That's my mission statement.
You know who gets this right? Is Hollywood. Every movie you've seen, every movie you're ever going to see is going to have what they call a log line or a tagline. And it sums up the movie in one sentence. For example, you've seen the movie Twins with Danny DeVito and Arnold Schwarzenegger. Their tagline is only their mother can tell them apart. And the best tagline of all, as rated by the experts, is the movie. Well, I'll tell you the tagline and see if you can guess the movie. In space, no one can hear you scream. You know what movie that is?
No.
Bet you saw it though. Alien.
Oh, Alien. Gotcha. Yeah.
So, I mean, it works like this. I mean, I saw Alien when I was in grad school, and my buddy Stu, we went to see a movie, and we couldn't get into when we want. So we go over, we look at the posters, and they had this, this murky thing, and it said, "In space, no one can hear you scream." So I said, "Hey, Stu, this looks interesting because we know it's outer space. We know it's a horror movie. What they didn't tell me is that I would have to sleep with a light on. I was so scared that night after seeing that goddamn movie. Yeah, they didn't omitted that, but it communicates very quickly, just and viscerally what it's all about. And if I understand you, a corporate statement, a mission statement does the same thing.
Yeah, no, thank you. That's a great analogy, and I'm going to steal that from you, Duff, and make it my own. Yeah, we in Vistage, the Vistage group I'm working with, they call it R&D, rip off and duplicate. So I'm gonna.
I don't know who I stole it from, but yes. Anyway, so we'll just pass it along. All right, lesson number 8: forgiveness is how you free yourself. Ain't that the truth?
Yeah, I think that forgiveness is a very hard thing for leaders, because most leaders are very competitive. Otherwise, they wouldn't be in that situation, right? So you're used to competing, you're used to fighting, you're used to comparing yourself to others, you're used to battling, and that creates some animosity. We have egos, but then to forgive others and forgive yourself is very freeing. I had to forgive some people at the University of North Carolina. And, it doesn't mean you forget, but to forgive, because we are all flawed. We are all flawed. And I think that, I'm a Christian, and I think that, when you look at Jesus and you try to model his behavior, and he's on the cross and he's forgiving the men who have done that to him, I'm like, I can at least forgive somebody who maybe fired me, or try to put myself in their shoes and realize, yeah, they were in a tough spot, and forgive them, because then, it helps you. It's like, drinking, someone says, like drinking rat poisoning and expecting the other person to die. It frees, it takes it off you, and now you can live in peace. And I do think that you need to forgive yourself, because I think sometimes I know I'm so hard on myself and look back and regret, like, why did I do that? Why, how stupid was I? Why shouldn't I stayed at Notre Dame? Why didn't I manage Coach Smith better? Got to forgive myself, because otherwise I'll be living in regret. And I call it driving over the bitter river. You know, that you want to drive over this river and there's so many triggers. And if you don't forgive, you're going to drive off into that river and drown in bitterness.
I used to work in psychiatry, running psychotherapy groups, and did my doctorates in that. And I can tell you, it all starts with self-acceptance. And self-acceptance is kind of generates that forgiveness for others, because just as you articulated very well, there are things you need to forgive yourself for if you're going to advance. Another way I look at it, I'm just quoting the Buddhist here, is don't cling. I'm always telling people, don't cling to hurts and sufferings, real or imaginary. You know, just don't cling to them. I mean, you experience them fully, that's good, but you know, you don't need to, you can put them down now. It's probably okay to do so. Lesson number 9. This is an equation. You'll have to work me through this. E plus R equals O. Is that right?
Yes, that's right. And as we touched on earlier, I stole that from Tim Kite, Kight, and he might be a good person to try to get. I know him not on a deep level. I follow him on Twitter. We've communicated on LinkedIn, but he's a good follow. And when I read E plus R equals O, it really stuck with me. And what does that mean? E is the event, R is our reaction, and O is the outcome. So an event happens. Let's say you're in your boardroom and, you know, Joanne shows up late and she's on her phone and you're frustrated that, you know, the meeting hasn't been, you know, adjourned yet. And, you know, you're waiting, you got a meeting to follow up, big presentation. She comes in and she says, I'm sorry, you know, for being late. And you rip into her and make a sarcastic comment. Now that sets the outcome is a tone in the meeting of tense stress. Ideas won't flow. Your reaction to her being late created an outcome that may not be favorable. Or maybe that's what you wanted. You wanted people to know, don't be late. However you want to handle it, that R is what the only thing you control. And the better we control our R, the better the outcome will be. And I think by putting it in that way, I joke about in my book, Rebound from Pain to Passion, that I was wired, Duff, growing up to react quickly, swiftly, and aggressively. That's what a basketball player growing up in the parks of Long Island did to survive. If you didn't react that way, you were considered a punk. Okay. And you lost respect. So that's my wiring. That's my condition. So too much of a good thing is a bad thing. I talk about that all the time. You know, there's this emotional circle around us. And if you're intense and aggressive, that's a good thing. But if you cross that line, that circle, you get outside that circle, that's a bad thing. You could be a nice guy. Well, if you're too nice, you're a pushover and people run over you. So you have to understand where is that emotional circle around your strength and make sure you stay inside that boundary. So we're on this vacation looking at the Niagara Falls in New York, and my wife and 2 kids, and they're grown at the time. I mean, this is only a couple of years ago. So my daughter's probably 18, 19 years old. And we're looking over the falls and somebody steps in front of me and blocks my view. And my initial reaction was to lean in and hit him with the forearm. And, you know, Duff, maybe he'd tumble over the fence into the falls. Maybe.
Maybe. Well, let's find
You
out.
Maybe. So I go to start to lean, and then I back off. And my daughter whispers in my ear, "Good R, Dad, good R." That was the affirmation. That was, as Coach Smith would say, praise the actions you want repeated. I felt like I passed a test and was proud of myself that I didn't put this guy over the fence into the falls.
Although he did box you out. So, I mean, we'll have to discuss that at a later time, but yes. But yes, I'm glad you avoided homicide, Matt. That's good. All right. Our last lesson is, I think this may be my personal favorite here, Matt. Lesson number 10, recruit your own personal board of directors.
Yes. I learned this from a gentleman in Dallas named Bob Bodine, and it crystallized for me that we need to have a board of directors, really what they are, truth tellers, a board of truth tellers, advisors, mentors that you can go to for unbiased advice. They are not emotionally attached to your job, your career. They are good friends that will tell you the truth. And that's why I have the Doherty coaching practice, and that's why I'm a Vistage chair. That's what this is all about, is having a personal advisory board that will tell you the truth, that will mine for the truth and challenge you, and not be intimidated by your title, or not be so emotionally wrapped up that they're going to be afraid to tell you something because it might impact their relationship with you or their status.
It takes a lot of humility and courage to do that. And like when you taught that course on failure at SMU, using your own personal experience, it takes a lot of humility and courage to do that. And I think that goes unappreciated. Matt, can I get you to turn your camera around to the Doherty coaching practice again? Because I want to show that to our viewers. I also want to read it through the podcast. It's the Doherty coaching practice, learn and grow. And the website is it dcp.com?
No, it's CoachMattDoherty.com.
CoachMattDoherty.com.
CoachMattDoherty.com. And the book, you get the book through there, but the book website is rebound-book.com.
Do you have a copy of the book with you?
That is it right there.
So that's you, Rebound from Pain to Passion, Leadership Lessons Learned, in parentheses, the hard way.
Exactly right.
Let me finish with one last question to you, if I may. We've talked about stuff that you've learned. What about something that you have unlearned recently? That is to say, something you absolutely positively knew to be true at one time, but now, being a little older and wiser, no, it's not the case.
You know, you were good to give me the heads up, knowing that I'd be asked this. And, you know, I was thinking about the reaction, you know, that to try to unlearn your reaction, the way you E plus R equals O, and to have to, you know, innately you react. It's like an animal, you know, you react. And so to have to undo that is there's inner conflict. Like, that's not how I'm wired. I'm wired to attack and be aggressive and be intense. Now I got to unlearn that and in a way show grace and back off and not have to win, you know, like not win every argument or not win you know, like it's okay to react softly. I think that's probably one thing that I've had to work on over time. and show some grace and I think that's it.
Well, you don't actually lose that capacity that you have. Tapping that fierceness is how I would describe it. And that's a good thing for men, but you do enhance the ability to use it when you have the ability to do something when you have another gear. It's like you want a behavioral smorgasbord. You don't just want, 2 or 3 dishes. You got to have a wide range, and it takes a while to develop those tastes.
You just connected with my heart, because when you talk about buffets, I can relate to a buffet with anybody. I did not have a quick first step on the court, but I have a quick first step to the buffet line. I promise you, Doug.
Motivation. It's all about motivation.
Yes. Now, a friend of mine, Malcolm Farmer, put it this way, and I think this makes sense and is along the lines of what you just touched on. We have a motivational toolbox. And I think I used the hammer too much, where I should have used the pliers. I should have used the screwdriver, to get the same effect that might even be more long lasting with less damage.
I think that's well put, well visualized way of describing it. Okay, we will finish here on that note. You have been listening to the podcast, 10 Lessons That Took 50 Years to Learn. Our guest today has been Matt Doherty, author, former basketball coach, a basketball junkie, really, still are. I don't think you kicked the habit. Public speaker, executive coach, and so much more. You can find Matt's book, just email us and we'll be able to get it to you, but it's to be online. The book is called Rebound. It is available on Amazon any minute now. This podcast has been produced by Robert Hossery and is sponsored by the Professional Development Forum. Professional Development Forum exists to help young people accelerate their career in a modern workplace. You can find out more about them, professionaldevelopmentforum.org. PDFs, they have podcast parties, anything you need, everything you want, it's right there, and it's all for free. That's the best thing about it. We'd like to hear from you. You can email us, podcast@10lessons.com. We'd like to hear, do you have some wisdom for us you'd like to offer? Do you have somebody you'd like us to interview? You want to know more about Matt's coaching practice or how to get his book? You contact us and we'll get back to you. That email again is podcast@10lessonslearned.com. Thank you for listening to 10 Lessons It Takes 50 Years to Learn. This is the only podcast on the internet that makes the world wiser lesson by lesson. Thanks for listening.